Welcome to another episode of Pound for Pound Box Report. I'm your host, Michael. Starting the show basically an hour early this week at the request of one of our guests, Gus. He joined us live from the UK. And, it's late when he joins us live. So, again, at the request of Gus, I'm going to start the show a little bit early this week. I'm your host, Michael. Joining me on the show this week is the aforementioned Gus from Corruption and Boxing, as well as Gail from Communities Digital News. We may have Daniel from the Inscriber come on a little bit later. Episode 257. For those who are new, Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report live YouTube show podcast, as well as blog discussing all things boxing. The motto is, when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. And given some of the fights that happened this weekend, when it's controversial, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns sweet science, it will get talked about. If you want to find out any and all information about Pound for Pound Boxing Report, one main place you want to go to, that's the blog page, p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. That's the link to the blog page. You check the right of the page, you'll find links to where to find us all over social media, where to find us on all platforms that carry podcasts, your Spotify, your iTunes, and whatnot, as well as the links to the donate links. Let donation be the best nation. Links to Cash Me, PayPal accounts on the right portion of the blog pages. Let's get things going. Recapping some fights that took place over the past week and weekend. Want to start in Japan, and instead of starting the show with ladies first, want to start the show with you, Gus. We're both fans of the lower weight fighters. Um, Been a lot of issues with the WBO super flyweight title, to be specific. Donnie Nietzsche has fought Aston Palicte for the vacant belts um, last year. Fight ended up in a draw. Many people felt that Nietzsche won. Nietzsche subsequently fought Kazuto Ioka for the vacant belts December 31st, 2018, with Nietzsche winning by decision. Nietzsche subsequently vacated the belt, seeking bigger and better opportunities. So the belt once again vacant. You had Palicte, who by this time had become number one contender, fighting Kazuto Ioka, the number two contender. They fought last week in Chiba, Japan. And the thing about this, Gus, I will have to say, one of the best performances of Ioka's career, in my opinion. Ioka winning by 10-round stoppage. Uh, he showed class. He showed professionalism. Uh, the movement was there in terms of his feet. The jab was terrific all night long. He got to an early lead, kept that early lead. There was a moment in round 7 where Palicte started to come on. He stepped up the intensity. He stepped up the punch rate. But the professionalism, the experience of an Ioka in his 17th, 18th world title fight showed his way. Even as Palicte was throwing bombs in there, Ioka kept his cool. Even as through the storm, he was able to see things. He went to the body on Palicte, and the way that he finished the fight, showing power late in the fight, highly impressive performance. Your thoughts, Gus?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Mike. A magnificent performance. Very impressed, watching the fight. It was at a very nice time for us in Europe, sort of around midday. Um, Ioka was obviously looking to make history to become the first Japanese fighter to be a world champion in 4 different weight classes, which he subsequently achieved. And it was an interesting style matchup. Many observers had felt that Palicte coming into the fight had had not only the advantage in terms of his height and his reach, but also power as well. But Ioka was, to me, he showed that he had the heavier hands throughout the fight. Not only such an intelligent fighter, but what really struck me in this fight was his movements. And we're not talking about exaggerated movements. It's just almost the subtleties of boxing that you don't really see when you make, just reactive and sometimes proactive movements, just half a step here, shift your body to the right here to open up the right hand, you know, slip the jab, shift to the left to open up his left hook. And that's what he was doing all night. It's just the way he just tends to move, has very good feet, and you have to obviously be light on your feet to have those adjustments. A well-rounded boxer, he has pretty much everything: ring intelligence, a fantastic jab, um, has speed in his punches, has viciousness when he wants to, um, utilize it when he feels it's necessary to sort of step up a gear. He felt that Palicte was coming back maybe in the mid rounds a little bit, but then he just, you know, turned it up another gear, pretty much controlled the fight throughout. That left hook, his patented left hook, was working, fantastically. Um, Palicte really couldn't make the adjustments, and also Ioka's defense was actually very good. And it's, once again, it's that movement. It works not only on the offense where he's able to open up the angles for his combination punching, but on the defense side, he's able to use that, the subtlety of his movements, obviously behind a tight guard as well at times, just to try and deflect punches. You see a lot of Palicte's punches hitting, the shoulder. Ioka was able to get his head out of the way on a lot of punches, slip, sort of roll and ride the punches. So defensively, also very, very decent as well. Um, Stepped it up later on. Um, could have boxed comfortably to a points decision, but he wanted to put on make a major statement, show that you know losing to Nieves, he felt he was unlucky, but I felt Nieves had won the fight. But in any case, it's two very high caliber fighters, so he rebounded well. Um, Stepped it up later on, and some of his combination punches, Palicte just really couldn't handle. So you know, very fitting that he becomes he makes history. He's been a real good champion. Very unlucky with that defeat to Amnet Ronrang, which was a bit of a ridiculous travesty with a fighter like that. So he's able to recover and rebound and put himself in for some, let's hope, some truly mouth-watering fights at 115 pounds in future, if they can happen.
Sorry, I was on mute. I'll go to Gail for her reaction. Um, Follow-up question. I mentioned kind of setting this fight up that Palicte fought Nieves, and even though it was a draw, many people felt that Nieves won that bout. What was the difference from your perspective in between the way that Nieves looked and performed against a Palicte versus versus an Ioka? Palicte, not just I see Daniel joining us. Let me mute him right quick. He hears the background noise. Um, Palicte not just taller and longer than Ioka, but significantly bigger. You saw in the fight, uh, Palicte looked a full weight class size bigger than Nieves. The difference between what we saw from Nieves, and what we saw from Ioka, and versus Palicte.
Well, what you saw is.
I was gonna. I'm sorry, Gail. That question was kind of a follow up question for Gus.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
The distance of where they fought the fights, Mike. Nieves only really tried to step it up later on, but he was teeing off for almost from outside the pocket, Mike, sort of long distance, with the straight right hands. But with Kazuto, he's able to fight at that range a little bit more, but because he's got more sort of dexterity and speed and better angles in his movement, and it's his hand speed and combination punches. So I think he was able to fight at a lot closer to Palicte and obviously inflict a lot more damage at a shorter range.
I'll go to you, Gail, and then you can follow up, Daniel. I don't from if I remember right during the pre talk, you were not able to see the fight, but yet and still, I want your opinion. Palicte was given a really good chance to win this fight by a lot of folks, but yet, given what you've heard, what you've read about the fight in itself, your reaction to how well, not only how well Ioka was able to perform, but the fact that he was able to stop him.
Well, the difference clearly between now and the Nietes fight is Palicte has learned from his experience fighting the more experienced Nietes. I mean, that was the best possible thing that could have happened to him, fighting somebody like Nietes, which has now been, 9 months ago. Now, he's had a fight since then before he fought Ioka, which happened to be here in the greater San Diego area. He had a fight against a Puerto Rican opponent, young opponent, undefeated, named Jose Martinez, wiped him out. And, Martinez was perfectly capable, skilled, no slouch. He was not a tune-up fight, not necessarily anyway. So what that shows me is fighters need to challenge themselves with good competition. It's like frequently, like tennis players will tell you, they get better fighting someone or playing someone better than they are. Fighters get better fighting somebody more skilled, or at least differently skilled than they are. And that's clearly what you're seeing, in my opinion, with Palicte. His last fight, he looked so confident and so powerful, and I have to ascribe that to having gotten through that fight with Nietes as well as he did. And the draw was, a fine result. I was one of many people ringside for that fight who thought, all things being even, Palicte should have won narrowly. Not a one of those things, not a robbery, but if you didn't know who the champion was, the skilled guy was, you would have gotten it for Palicte. I see the same trajectory now going on, and boy, I would love to see that rematch. Before Nietes gets a little too much older, and it doesn't become an even matchup anymore. But I love what I'm seeing with Palicte. When learning occurs, the record doesn't matter. These guys improve, and the fans need to understand that. You need to not get wrapped up so much into the O's. And
are you saying you impressed with Palicte, or you impressed with Ioka?
Impressed with Palicte. Impressed.
Even though he lost?
Even though he lost. Learning occurs. He will only get better. I want him to go back to go see what he could do against Nietes today. He looked so good in his last fight. Learning does occur, and that's important to remember.
Oh, so you see value. Okay, so you see.
Gail, did I hear you correctly? You felt that Palicte beat Donnie Nietes, is that correct?
I do. In that draw, we thought Palicte got the better of him narrowly, but
wow.
Narrowly enough that we could live with a draw. Yeah, we did see him winning.
How many glasses of wine did you drink that day?
Never on press row, and hardly ever. So you can't.
So in spite of the loss to Ioka, you still see value in what Palicte was doing because of the improvement from the not Nietes bout.
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think that was a great result for him. Yeah, losing by a stoppage doesn't necessarily mean you lost the entire fight that occurred before, which is exactly what we're going to talk about when we get into the Rigondeaux Cota fight later.
Oh, that's an interesting take, because I felt that Palicte lost basically every round, minus arguably round 7. I thought Ioka was in control that much. I will go to Daniel. Hopefully, he got his mic issues resolved. Your thoughts on the Ioka Palicte bout?
I saw it a little bit closer. I didn't
Okay.
see a full domination by Ioka, but I was fine with the decision. I was fine with the way it ended, but Palicte is very, very impressive. I can see why, especially like what Gil mentioned, the fight and the draw, why Nietes was very hesitant, other than just being friends, of fighting him again. He provides a tough challenge. It's not something that's going to be easy. And you can have fights also where one guy can look like he's dominating, but it's a tough domination. And that is what this fight entailed. Now, to me, like I said, the right guy won. And it's going to be interesting what Kazuto is going to do now. I would say I would heavily lean towards trying to get a rematch with Nietes. Trying to see what you have there left before both of you really cruise on in age, particularly Nietes. But it was a very, very good fight. Thank you for sending us the video. And there's very, very few fights that I can think of Kazuto Ioka and think that it's not a good fight. And he never disappoints.
First of all, I want to thank everybody for joining us in the chat. Shout out to Denise, longtime fan, and listening to Pound for Pound Box Report in the live YouTube chat. Thanks to Jim. Shout out to Jim Leahy, Unrivaled, MB. Read some comments here in the chat. When it came to the fight, MB, he had the fight for Ioka by 4 rounds. He and the Unrivaled has some comments about Nietes in terms of that fight with Palicte. He had a 9-3 for Nietes. Let's talk future here. Okay, Ioka, he got the win, right? Afterwards, well, it was interesting, I should say, that before the bout, Ioka suggested that if he was to lose, he may retire. But now in the aftermath, he's talking unification, with Juan Francisco Estrada being the target. Interesting, Gallo is a popular name right now in the super flyweight division. Jermall Nakaha's current IBF champion, he's trying to seek a bout with him as well. Here's the thing, and I'll go back to you, Gus. While Ioka, he talked, he wants a fight with Gallo Estrada. He would like a fight with Khalid Yafai. The name that I did not hear was a fighter in a division right below super flyweight, and that's flyweight. Most notably, Koisei Tanaka. Tanaka, current WBO 112-pound champion, getting now some attention in terms of pound for pound status. 3-time 3-weight champion. Has already hinted that he's going to move up to 115 pounds sooner than later. It would seem Ioka Nietes bout would be a really natural fit in Japan. Big money fight in that region of the world. Yet, in the days after the fight, you didn't hear his name being mentioned. Where do you think that Ioka will go? Do you think he will try to seek a unification bout? Because he also said he wants to kind of up his brand internationally? Or do you think ultimately, at the end of the day, we will indeed see a domestic showdown between he and a Tanaka?
It's pretty crazy, Mike, because the champions are spread out. You've got a champion from Japan, from the Philippines, from Mexico, and the UK. So who knows what's going to happen? But with Tanaka, Mike, the WBO have always got advantageous rules, for a lot of their mandatories and champions of a certain division. If they want to vacate and move up, then there is a possibility that the WBO can install them as mandatories for an ascending division. They've done that way back, even when Nassim Hamed, fought Steve Robinson, his first fight at featherweight, when he was #1 ranked at super bantamweight. So those rules have been in existence for a while. So to me, that's the logical fight, Mike. Fight in Japan. The promotional side wouldn't be too difficult either. So that's something that Tanaka has spoken about. He was talking about 115 and Ioka specifically. So maybe his side and his father and that can push for that one. But with Ioka, we don't know, Mike. So many opportunities. He's fighting in the United States as well now. He signed with. Who's he with? Is he with 360 Degree Promotions? Is that his primary promoter, or is that a secondary sort of overseas promoter?
I'm thinking
I think
secondary.
that's secondary. Secondary.
Okay. So yeah, it gives him some sort of, it gives him flexibility that should a fight happen with Estrada in a unification. I think Estrada is obviously talking about one of the other champions. I'm sure he'd rather fight an Ioka. So as to what network that happens, I'm not sure, given that it looks like Estrada is fighting very much on sort of the zone nowadays. So so in honestly, Mike, I'm not sure. I personally, I think Tanaka moving up and Ioka that's the fight for me. But if anything, if Ioka targets one of the other champions, if it's Estrada, that to me would be the better fight. I think he beats Sankajas, no problem, Mike. I think he beats Yafai, no problem. I think the better three for me is Donny, Nieres, Ioka, and Estrada. So I would rather they mix it up between them and sort of interject Tanaka.
Yeah, it's interesting that Nietes is the one who got the draw, in which many people felt he won. I think Gail feels that Palicte beat Nietes. Nietes got the draw against Palicte. He got the win against Ioka, but he gambled by he made a gamble, a calculated risk when he gave up the belt, and yet given what has developed in 2019, he could be the one left out the loop here. It's interesting how things turn in boxing. I will go to you, Gail and Daniel. I know you said you would like to see Palicte fight Nietes again, but let's switch it towards Ioka. What direction do you think he will go? And then you can follow up as well, Daniel.
Well, the smartest thing for him to do is go after one of the many belt holders out there. And it is interesting and to me delightful that you have the belts.
Okay, let me stop right there. I don't know who you are, Mr. Sloth, but those kind of comments here will not be tolerated. Welcome to the block party, sir.
That should be very interesting when we look at that later. Thank you. Carrying on, I think he's going to be looking for better opportunities. I mean, it would be crazy for him not to try to try to accumulate another belt. And he could go a lot of places in the world, or maybe he can lure somebody to come to Japan. Probably not. He's going to probably have to, go into the champion's den. So to me, his most dangerous opponent, but probably his most friendly venue is probably to fight Estrada here, especially if another flyweight tournament's put together by 360, especially in Southern California, Japanese fighters have a natural constituency there. They're extremely well received. It's not a home fight, but it can be pretty darn close. Of course, you have a Mexican fighter, so then that makes it a fun rivalry. Yeah, on Cajas makes sense. If he wants to fight another Filipino fighter, if that's attractive to him, that's a good choice. I mean, the honest thing is, as long as he goes after a belt, he really can't go wrong. That's smart. But as we hear, and as you wrote for Three Kings, you've got Tanaka floating around out there. Current flyweight of WBO flyweight champion. And maybe that's where he decides to go. The good thing is he's got options, and they're all pretty good. There really isn't a bad one in the bunch.
Your thoughts, Daniel?
It's very interesting when it comes to Kazuto in this situation, because when you're involved with 360 Promotions, you're kind of a bit of a free agent as far as like the little bit of the landscape when it comes to both the streaming services and who you're dealing with, because Tom Loeffler pretty much almost works with anybody at this stage. So if he wants the easiest fight to get a belt, you're fine. Not even a second thought, you're fine. If he wants to make it a regional affair, where you can still fight in the US, but it's still going to be an Asian affair, Arcañez makes the sense. Estrada makes the most sense when you want the big venue. When you want StubHub, you make it with Estrada, because Estrada showed now that he is ready for prime time. And we know Kazuto has been ready for prime time, but mainly he's been prime time in the Japanese audience. We have to see how he is prime time with a really, really good mixture of Japanese and Mexican audience. Particularly a very, very fervent Mexican audience. But I have a feeling that it's going to probably be Tanaka. Because Kazuto has been like the main money draw in Japan for a while. And even though Inoue superseded him as far as box office for a little bit, you never had that little bit of a passing of the torch fight between him and Inoue, because Inoue moved up to bantamweight. Well, the next logical person is Tanaka. So you can't have a bit of a passing of the torch, because Tanaka could claim to be the top draw in Japan if he beats Kazuto. And Inoue doesn't have to worry anything, because Inoue, he's growing his brand internationally now. So I would probably, like I said, I would prefer to go on after the champions. If it's something from easiest to hardest, Estrada, Arcañez. From hardest to easiest, Estrada, Arcañez, you're fine. But I have a feeling that it's ultimately going to wind up being Tanaka, and it would not surprise me if it's Tanaka on New Year's Eve.
Mike, I just want to add one more thing. Thinking about it a little bit more, it's about time that the Japanese fighters now started dominating a division. So, in terms of answering that question, I would prefer it if it is Estrada, because Estrada is now number one at 115 pounds. So there's not enough unifications with a lot of these Japanese champions. I know Taguchi was the last person to do so. That's okay, but we know that Inoue has an opportunity of obviously becoming a sort of a unified champion as well. So I think it would be better, because Ioka, you couldn't really say when he's been coming up, when he's even been coming up from sort of like flyweight, whether he was actually number one at any of the divisions. So from a legacy perspective, given that he's obviously made history now, I think it's about time to try and establish his legacy, and that would be to fight, who is the best at the division. So Estrada would be the best fight.
Sorry, I was on mute again. One last question before we move on to other fights. I was talking about this fight on Colossal Sports TV. Shout out to Big Cool. from Colossal Sports TV. I was on there with the crew from Three Kings Boxing. The question was posed: with this win, can there be a claim for Ioka being HOF Hall of Fame fighter? I'm going to pose that question here to each of you, to everyone here. 4-division champion, 4 weights. The only asterisk, he's fought just about everyone, Ioka, minus Chocolatito. If his career is done right here, right now, is Kazuto Ioka a Hall of Fame fighter? Anyone?
Numbers alone, you have to say yes. Knowing how people vote and don't always respect fully the lower weight divisions, there are probably some voters who would still want to see him fight a unification fight of the nature we've been talking about. And I do think, should he get a win against somebody like Estrada, then yes, he does. He goes, then no problem.
Gus, Daniel, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think he's done enough to secure an induction into the Hall of Fame. If you look at his resume, he has beaten a lot of champions. He's inflicted defeats on a number of champions the first time out. If you look at it, like Juan Hernandez, etc., he was the first to actually blitz all of them. Guys who went on to become champions later on. So it shows, it adds a lot of credibility to his resume. But there's always been maybe at 112 he was considered the best. At flyweight, although he was only a single belt holder, he was generally considered the best. But there's always counter arguments, Mike. So I still think he can cement it. But to answer your question, I think he has done enough, given this day and age, given the number of belts that is around at the moment, the level of opposition who is fought. But there's still time to really cement that legacy.
Your thoughts, Daniel?
On merit, yes, easily. On merit, easily. Look at the names he's beaten. Look at what he just accomplished in beating Palicte. And look at what he can accomplish still. The problem, like the Gail mentioned, is a lot of times the lower weight classes just don't get a lot of love. And merit alone, unfortunately, is not going to make it a lot of times. But, well, if as much as I love the guy, if Arturo Gatti can get into the Hall of Fame, there shouldn't be a problem for Kazuto Ioka to make the Hall of Fame.
Here's a question for you, Mike. Does he have a better resume than Adrian Broner, who is also a 4-weight champion?
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. He unified the division at 105, I believe it was. And the guy he unified the division with went on to become a 3-time 3-division champion himself. So yes, he has a better resume than Broner.
Well, I think Broner belongs in the Hall of Fame, so that makes sense.
In the chat,
Broner belongs in a Hall of Fame. It's just not the actual Hall of Fame.
What the About Bad Actors Hall of Fame, or the About BS Hall of Fame?
I would probably say the When Keeping It Real Goes Wrong Hall of Fame.
In the chat here, MB, in our discussion about the future for Ioka and the possibility of unification, he says Ancañas is the weak link in his opinion. And Denise said that yes, in her opinion, Ioka is definitely a Hall of Famer. Let's move on to talk about some other fights. We're going from Japan to California, Fantasy Springs in Indio, to be specific. Earlier this year, Andrew Cancio scored one of the upsets of the year, defeating Alberto Machado to win the WBA title at 130 pounds. They had a rematch over the weekend, same venue. Gail, you were in attendance for their first fight in February. You are in attendance for the rematch this weekend. You predicted that Cancio would win the rematch, he not only won, but won it in earlier rounds, and I would argue dominated more in this fight than he did in the first fight. At least he didn't get knocked down like he did in the first fight. Machado, his complaint was that he had issue getting down to 130 pounds, and that's why his performance was so subpar. He said he was in better shape for the rematch, but for me, Gail, it's just that Cancio is too strong physically, too powerful for the likes of Machado. He got to his body in the first fight. He got to his body in the second fight, and once he started getting to his body, the fight was a wrap because he just didn't have the strength to hold him off. Uh, Beautiful body shot to end the fight, left hook right to the liver in the third round. Machado, he got up at the count of 9.5 basically, but the referee said he had seen enough. He was getting dominated throughout. Mentioned in the name of this particular podcast is that Andrew Cancio not a one-hit wonder. He proved that in this rematch. Being at ringside, your reaction?
Well, I had originally predicted that Cancio would win, but he would win with a little more of an attrition fight by perhaps the 8th or 9th round. Well, what I didn't account for is that Cancio basically started round 5 at the opening bell because it looked exactly like where he had left off in the first fight. He went right at him. He didn't allow him any getting to know you, feeling out. No, done. That did not happen. He almost put his head straight down and went right after him. It was a carbon copy of exactly where he left off. And unfortunately, Machado was right where he'd left off too. He claimed that he was in good shape for the fight. He made weight no problem. He didn't struggle on the scale. He didn't look dehydrated. He looked fine. But the truth is he just has no answer for Cancio. And we've all seen so many times when a guy wins a title, he gets that extra rocket fuel of confidence. And Cancio absolutely had that. So he just went right with the game plan that had worked for him before, went right after him. He did suffer cuts. He suffered a small cut over the right eye and then a bigger cut over the left eye, or maybe it was the opposite. He said later it didn't bother him, wasn't getting in his eyes. He said, just a few more scars from my face, whatever. He was fine. But he went in with a sense of urgency. He wanted to prove a point, and he absolutely did prove a point. And if you compared photos from the first fight to the rematch at the moment of the knockdown and stoppage, they were virtually identical. It was the same punch. The only way you would have been able to tell the photos apart is, number one, wearing different gear, but number two, referee Raul Cais Sr. refereed the fight this weekend. His son refereed the fight back in February, so that was a sort of an interesting trivia question. I tell you, much is made of the fact that Cancio still has a full-time job. He works as a natural gas line maintenance crew member for Southern California Gas.
It's time for him to get paid.
He made 150.
I mean, well,
I'll tell you why he did it. First of all, he needs health insurance for his kids, and he wasn't willing to take the gamble of quitting his job. And we all think that they're making a ton of money at this level. They're not. He made a $75,000 purse in February, but once you pay everybody, that's not a lot of money, especially if you're paying rent in Southern California, which he is. He's up in Oxnard. He made 150 this fight, so he doubled the purse, but still, for a guy as cagey as Cancio and where he's from, he still doesn't want to quit his job. And you know, he's doing okay. And you've got to make the case, the fact that he has no wiggle room in his schedule. He's at work today. He's back at work today. Now, I hope to God his supervisor or his boss sent him home after an hour or two, or they all had a good time and enjoyed it and then sent him home. But he says he needs health insurance for his kids. He needs the job. He isn't quite ready to quit yet. And you have to say that he's turned himself into an absolute power punching, machine at 130, because the guy's able to work a jackhammer for 2 or 3 hours at a stretch every day. And he talked about how when he first started the job, it used to just kick his ass, but now doesn't think a thing about it. And if you look at how big his forearms and his wingspan across his back is, that's from his strength and conditioning he does all damn day. I'm not sure. He probably can afford to quit the job. I'm thinking he might think to himself, damn, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Maybe I don't want to change anything. Everything's going so well. But he's a terrific story. He's a decent human being outside the ring, as well as a good fighter inside the ring. And what was truly charming is after he won and the broadcast was over, he's still doing interviews on press row. His son and daughter, who are, I think, 8 and 11, were inside the empty ring playing. Gotta love it.
When I say it's time for him to get paid, okay, you mentioned he earned 75,000 in his title winning bout against Machado, earned 150 for this fight. If his handlers, his promoters were on the up and up, he should get significant amount more for his next time in the ring. I mean, Jesse Vargas earning 1.4 million fighting on DAZN against a Humberto Soto.
I get
36-year-old.
But look at Vargas. He is a name that people know. He has fought arguably bigger name opposition. Say what you will. He has had fights against the likes of Manny Pacquiao, which makes him a name people know. We think Daniel Cancio's story has gone nationwide. He isn't known even a fraction as much as somebody like Andy Ruiz Jr., for example. And although the venue was more or less a sellout, we're still talking about a 3,000 person venue. If he fights Rene Alvarado, titled, mandatory defense, which he did say after the fight, Rene's been very patient. He's been waiting a long time. He deserves his opportunity. That's not a household name. So until he gets a fight with the likes of, say, Gervonta Davis, now that's a payday. That is a payday. I would even argue against Jojo Diaz. Not the biggest moneymaker for Golden Boy. And the fact is they're, sort of eating their own if they do that. So he really, to get the big, big payday, needs to go after somebody like Davis. Now that is the kind of fight you do quit your job or you go down to part-time or whatever. You train, you get the big check. If you lose, at that point, you've had a pretty darn impressive resurrection of your career and some decent money. And he still says to this day, his one and only goal is to earn enough money to buy a house in Southern California. Well, he's going to need a couple more 6-figure paydays to do that.
I still say on GP they should up his pay. They're gonna double his money from first fight to this fight. They should double his money again.
Well, Michael, he's not going to get Vargas money. Well, first of all, Vargas shouldn't have gotten the money.
I'm not saying million, but like I said, double his money. Give him $300,000. Give him $300,000 for his next fight.
Give him $250,000, $300,000, absolutely. But you know what? That's probably still not enough for him. Thinking long term, thinking as a father, to quit that job. Probably not yet. And, he's got a pretty good deal. Yeah, he works his ass off, but it's working. They accommodate his schedule. Although he did all of the pre-fight media interviews on his lunch hour. No kidding.
Yeah, I heard he had to take annual leave to defend his world title.
Yeah, well, he takes his vacation days, which is why he said he would go back to work Monday because he didn't want to eat a day off. It really is amazing. It's rather impressive.
Yeah, let's get Gus and Daniel into this discussion. Reaction to the win, and what could be possibly next for Cancio. As Gail mentioned, Cancio mentioned the mandatory. His name escapes me right now. Rene Alvarado, who Cancio said is deserving of a title shot. He also mentioned eventual rematch against Jojo Diaz. So thoughts on the fight itself and what could be in store in upcoming for Cancio. Gus, Daniel, whoever wants to start the discussion, I do not care.
You know, Mike, I think between me and you, Mike, we broke this fight down to a T on our chat on Skype. I think after looking at all of the permutations of weight and style and deficiency, I think in the end we said that unless Machado stops him by round 3, he gets stopped. Perfect. So,
and it wasn't just the issue of weight. As you watch the fight itself, Gus, from a technical standpoint, Cancio was getting the better of it as well because Machado, despite of the height and the length, he just couldn't keep Cancio off of him, head or body.
when I think about Machado, Mike, I think back to something that the character Dr. Tyrell said in Ridley Scott's 1982 sort of all-time classic film Blade Runner. He says to Rutger Hauer in that scene, he says, "The light that burns twice as bright burns half the life," and that's it with Machado. His brief insurrection for a little while has just become unraveled, and it's so frustrating for a fighter who has not only all of the physical advantages at 130 pounds, given his height, his reach, the fact that he's southpaw. He's a puncher, not only with his left hand, but his right hook is arguably even better. But he doesn't understand how to control distance. He's got no lead hand control, which is one of his disadvantages. He doesn't know how to stop a pressure fighter specifically on coming forward. And you saw a glimpse of that when he fought the Ghanaian fighter Mensah, who he hurt very early. But after that, his game just completely disappeared into, it was shocking. And he showed those sort of vulnerabilities with pressure fighters, certainly at short range, where he's just unable to. And nor you can argue that a 5 feet 10-inch fighter, given that he's fighting guys at 5'6", 5'7", with 67 sort of inch reaches, he shouldn't really be fighting with them on the inside. Okay, fair enough. Now, when you're fighting against Cancio, you know that he's going to come compact and low, which you'd started certainly in this fight, what he learned from, because he changed the fight from the full 5th round after being sort of dropped with the uppercut in the first. But he's a warrior, Mike. He showed it against Rocky Juarez that he's able to come up off the counter. So you can never underestimate a fighter who, with his sort of background, he's going to be super hungry, super determined. He's going to it's going to be a live or die fight for these sort of guys. So he had to prepare to go to war with this fight if necessary, but there was no need to do so. Now, with Cancio, now when you've got a pressure fighter who's coming forward and you have that sort of advantage, what do you need to do from a technical standpoint? You've got a jab to his body that stops a pressure fighter coming forward, but he did none of that in the first fight. He did no evidence of that in this fight. He was circling to the wrong side as well, so he was actually coming into his left hand. Cancio did some good things very well. He coming in low. He's actually a very underrated boxer at that sort of range as well. Not only just sort of marking forward in sort of straight lines, but he's able to deflect punches actually quite well. He was able to read Machado's straight left hand, blocked those shots very well, shifted his body slightly to the left, to come underneath that follow-up right hook that Machado was always looking for, tend to get underneath those punches well. And, his combinations at that short range on the inside, Machado, just no punch resistance, Mike. We saw that against Jermell Corrales, even headshots he couldn't handle. He was getting rocked, but his power got him out of jail in that fight. In the first fight, body shots in particular. And in this fight, where he said that he didn't have to, he wasn't crushing sort of 15 pounds in the final week. There was no excuses. His son wasn't ill as he was in the first fight. So all right, you've got to give him a little bit of sympathy. Maybe personal circumstances weren't right for him. Okay, fair enough. But he had a much longer training camp this time. I was following the build-up quite intensely from a betting perspective just to see whether he could actually make a redemption. Said that, he was cutting weight gradually. He was at 132 a couple of days out from the fight. So that was encouraging. But the fight had clearly now elucidated that he has no punch resistance, either headshots or body shots. He's only relying on his power, but if he's unable to box, Mike, he's got nowhere to go forward, either forwards or backwards. He's got to go back and he's got to learn how to fight at long distance, because he can't mix it up with not only world-class punches, but even guys who have got reasonably good power as well. But maybe Cancio, he maybe with him, Mikey, he just had too much of it. Very difficult for a guy who's a full-time employee who's trying to fight as well to try and make subsistence of income. So maybe with him, maybe it's one of those gems like sort of Tevin Farmer, where you've learnt boxing on the hard side now. He's got a bit of shine, he's got a belt, maybe you'll get some additional sponsorship. He's definitely got power, you can see that. He gave even Ronnie Rios, guys like that who are undefeated, guys who he lost with, but he certainly caused them trouble as well in the fight. So he's certainly got something about him as well. And given his record, Mike, 21-4-2, the other champions are going to be crying out to fight him, and it could be to their detriment.
I'll go to you, Daniel. Your thoughts on the fight, and I posed the question on Twitter, and I'll ask you here. The question to you here. Cancio mentioned he wants a rematch with Jojo Diaz, former title challenger at 126 pounds, has moved up to 130. Let's just say Cancio indeed gets a rematch with Diaz, who defeated Cancio. I think it was 2 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. How would you think that fight would go now, given the fact that Cancio has picked up a belt, a world title, and the confidence that you gain from becoming a world champion?
All right. When you think about that type of fight, it's very telling to see how each person is developed. Obviously, Cancio has a lot of confidence at 130. He just beat a guy who was considered one of the hardest punchers in the division twice. And Jojo Diaz is a person that's not exactly known for punching power. The problem is that Jojo feels comfortable pretty too at 130 pounds. And he does have a pretty decent skill set. And one of the things that he probably is a little bit more advantage to him when it comes to Cancio. Cancio can have the confidence, but Jojo Diaz already knows what some of his tendencies can be. So he can avoid it. Some of the mistakes that Machado made while trying to box him pretty well and trying to see some of his punches and his counters can affect Cancio in the way that Machado's weren't, especially in this fight. So to me, it's still a probably 50-50 fight. You have to give obviously champion. It'll be an interesting fight to me in many ways because say what you want. Like I said, I'm still pretty high on Jojo Diaz. So I'll give him a shot in that sense. But when it comes to this fight, I found it very, very telling that Machado essentially never really attempted to use the advantages that got him that knockdown in the first round in the first fight, which was his height and his reach. He didn't try to make it a long distance fight. He didn't try to really make Cancio work or tire him out using distance. He pretty much let Cancio get on the inside and try to fight his fight. And that's a mistake for a guy who's already confident enough to know that he can hurt you if you fight him on the inside. Now, granted, yeah, there wasn't other knockdowns that came with it, but it was almost exactly the same way that he won the first time. Body punch, Machado goes to the knee. The only difference was that at this time, Machado got up before 10, but they weren't going to give him another chance. Now, what's probably an improvement for Cancio in this sense is he had he had a sense of urgency. He was able to know that I can't let Machado establish a jab. I can't let Machado try to dictate the pace. I have to get inside of him, and I have to do it soon. And he did it from jump. Like Gail mentioned, this was round 5, essentially, of the first fight. And the main difference probably between these two fights is the Cancio is a lot more effective inside than he was in the first fight. And that opened up for a lot more combinations, both inside and outside, body to the head. And it was a much better performance. Obviously, like I said, Cancio did have a full training camp to focus this time. And now with the champion the way he is, hopefully, like I agree with you, he needs to get paid. So maybe, well, Tank is probably not going to be the person he's not going to go after, obviously, because it's obvious the zone versus PBC. But what can actually happen is maybe because they're both part of the zone, Cancio versus Farmer. That'll be a really, really good fight between a puncher versus a boxer. Or worse yet, sorry, and or probably another fight, and like he raised his hand as soon as Cancio said he wanted to unify. Jermell Herring, another good example of guys that, like I said, Herring's a little bit more of a boxer. Cancio is obviously the puncher, so there's various type of styles. I would love to fight against Tank. I don't think, like I said, there's too many issues to make it happen, but I want to fight with Tank just simply because of the fact of what the WBA did to Machado in trying to make Tank the super champion and Machado the regular champion when Machado won the super title. That's the main reason I want to see this fight against Tank, and probably because I think Cancio could beat Tank.
Oh wow, really?
I happen to agree. I also think he could take Herring fairly easily. I think Burchelt would present a problem. We might end up with a crazy action fight in that one. So I think he needs to. I think the only guy he really probably needs to steer clear of for the foreseeable near future is Burchelt. I don't have any fear of him facing anyone else. The what's likely to happen is he'll probably face his mandatory in September on the Canelo undercard of whatever Canelo ends up doing in September. And we don't know, but Canelo will fight somebody in September. And the Alvarado fight, that's not a main event fight unless they go back to Fantasy Springs, because he can pack the house there. All local folks. He's from that area. It's a good venue for him. They could do that. Golden Boy could do that in their sleep, but he's likely to be on a Canelo undercard if it's the mandatory at this point. But I think he needs to stay away from Burchell. And Herring said, "Hey, I'm out here on social. Hey, what about me? How come you didn't mention me last weekend?" And Cancio and Golden Boy said, "Well, we're not the kind of folks to, call out people." And he really didn't, other than mentioning his mandatory. So Herring's clearly interested, which is good news and smart. And Herring should definitely avoid Burchell. Burchell will kill him.
Mm-hmm. While Cancio and Machado was really the showcase bout on this DAZN card at Fantasy Springs, it was the undercard bout between Angel Acosta and Elwin Soto that had folks talking the most. Acosta, one of the hardest hitting punchers at 108 pounds, attempting to make, I believe, it was the 5th defense of his WBO light flyweight belt against a Soto who was unknown. I didn't give him much of a chance. I knew he was a two-time Mexican amateur champion, but his professional resume was not that noteworthy. But would turn out to be a really, really good fight. Soto, first of all, showed a heck of a chin. A. B. He came to really, really fight and put on a really good performance. And the fight turned out to be a barn burner. Soto he had a habit early in the round of getting Acosta's attention, and Acosta will eventually rebound and win rounds. That was the case in rounds 2, 3, and 4. In particular, what was a really good fight, and I'll go to you, Gus, was kind of ruined to me and to many others by what occurred in the last round. Early in the round, Soto once again hurt Acosta with a counter left hook, stopped Acosta in his tracks. Soto went to follow up assault, and then the referee came in and just stopped the fight abruptly. For me, given what we had saw in the previous 11 rounds, given what we had saw in the early rounds, when again Soto was able to stun Acosta, but Acosta would always come fighting back. I just felt that the referee should have gave Acosta once again another opportunity to kind of collect himself, because given all the punishment that both fighters issued out and took, given what Acosta specifically was able to take throughout the fight, as a world champion, he should have been afforded to essentially go out like a champion. That was a quick stoppage, in my opinion. So while Soto, he got the upset win to become a world champion, it's clouded, in my opinion. Your thoughts?
I mean, those who think that a standing 8 count is not, shouldn't be sort of factored into any fights. This was a perfect situation where a standing 8 count would have been hugely beneficial, because when you look at the criterion of a referee, Mark, now does the referee look at the fighters in specifically, their ability to take punishment, their ability to come back? Has a fighter gone down before? These are the sort of questions that over the years, us, boxing fans and journalists have been almost, asking the commissions, etc., that, these referees need to do far more research on the fighters. They can't just look at a fight in isolation, because we've seen so many instances where stoppages have been premature, but conversely, we've seen decisions where fighters have taken far too much punishment as well, where referees haven't stopped it. So it is a very difficult situation to try and balance. But in this fight, Acosta was not only hurt in round 3, round 4, 6, 7, as well as the final round as well. But as you mentioned, Mike, he showed the ability to come back, and specifically in the third round where he was leaping in. He came in making the error of leaping in with a left right. But Soto, to his credit, just took a sidestep to his left and came back with a beautiful left-right hand of his own. This was an unbelievable fight. What I've mentioned all along, Mike, and I've done videos on it, the junior flyweight division is the best, it's the deepest, the most competitive, and the most exciting in all of boxing. I've said it for years, and I'll carry on saying it. And just when you thought the division couldn't get any better, along comes a complete unknown in Soto, just out of nowhere, as you mentioned, Mike. When you critically analyze that CV, yes, there is power, but you're talking about fighting in Mexico, fighting against debutees, fighting against 7-round fighters, 8-round fighters. The level of opposition he's fought guys absolutely nowhere near to the level of Acosta. And let's remember, Mike, he's also coming up from 105 as well recently. So when you factor in all of that, what a fighter, what a performance. Scintillating power he's got in both hands, when I'm 5 o'clock in the morning when I'm hearing his punches, with headphones on, it's like man, some serious dig to his punches, very fast combinations as well. Power in both hands, but Acosta was just making the error, and he's a puncher by trade, so he's probably thinking, I'm just going to go in there and just knock this guy out, period, what he's been doing all along. But he should have learned from the third round that he was just leaning in with his punches. He kept making that mistake of leaning in, getting caught with the right hand, but then because Soto's movements were better, certainly as you mentioned, Mike, during the early part of the rounds, Acosta, and you've got to give credit to him, Mike, because in this fight, his recovery and what he showed to me, the ability to come back. As the rounds were progressing and Acosta was making the adjustment of not getting tagged with that right hand, he was starting to use his jab a bit better, shifting to the right direction, stepping to the left to get away from Soto's right hand, and coming back with that double left hand of his own. And that was working, and that was slowing down Soto, and we saw his inexperience in the fight as well. The body shots that Acosta, the left hand he was hitting him, was definitely slowing him down. And it was surprising to see a 22-year-old with not that many fights, really slowing down. He'd become a little bit predictable as the rounds were going on. He would have a quick spurt here and there, some sort of explosive punching power, quick sort of combinations. He definitely appeared to have the power, but Acosta was definitely, and in the 10th round, when Acosta definitely hurt him and he began to back up for the first time on the ropes. So the tide at that point had definitely swung. I felt Acosta going into the final round. I thought, given the 10-8 round in the third, I felt he had a 3-4 point lead, Mike. I felt he was comfortable, but he just came out too aggressive. His corner were telling him, you don't have to take the risk. Whereas Soto, conversely, his corner were telling him that you've got to gamble all or nothing now. And then even in his post-fight, Mike, he was honest enough to say that, he thought he was going to lose the fight. So, there was no illusions about what sort of a predicament he was in. But it was, I don't know, Acosta just got out too aggressive. They got up against the ropes. To be fair, it was a very, very good move from Soto to sort of spin off and land with that sort of mean left hook. Acosta was hurt. He came in for the left right hand, and the referee just immediately jumped in. And for the referee to say that he saw his eyes, I don't believe so, because Soto was literally right on him. He had spun round, and Acosta sort of backed up. shifted his left foot back, went back up, and that's how the referee can make those sort of deductions there and then, Mike.
Right.
To me, this is ridiculous. You just haven't given him, even if he goes down, Mike, it's another 10-8 round. Acosta still wins the fight. Well, if there's fair and balanced decision making, and you would think it's a Miguel Cotto sort of De La Hoya co-promoted card, you'd think that maybe Acosta would have got the nod. I'm not sure what the scorecards the scorecards were up until then. I'll let sort of Gal fill me in later on, but the referee was far too premature. Acosta, he'd recovered almost instantly, Mike. He'd got his hands up, and as soon as the referee had waved it off, he was remonstrating with the referee immediately. There was no delayed reaction in terms of doing so. I didn't see his knees buckle. The fourth round, he looked even more hurt than he did in the 12th round, Mike. So that's an unbelievably bad decision. I don't give a fuck. It's not down to me losing a hell of a lot of money. It's just giving a fair and a balanced opinion. An unbelievable fight, and I really hope that a rematch, happens immediately.
Yeah, you stole my words with the last comments, and I'll go to you, Daniel, and Gail, who once again was at ringside for this fight. Two things here. Well, a few things here. One, as I mentioned, the chin of Soto. Two, it was a great fight. And three, given how well the fight was, and more importantly, how the fight ended, I too want to see a rematch between these two ASAP.
Yeah, like you make this fight, you make this rematch the co-main event of whatever Canelo's going to do on September, because it deserves that much of praise, because this was a hell of a fight. And it's a weird situation when you look at the fight where Acosta's known for being a puncher, known for being a knockout, and ultimately what Pauli wanted best for, as much as Acosta was landing, he was being more accurate, he was landing more and being more patient with it. And to answer your question, Gus, Acosta was up, I think, by at least 3 or 4 points on all of the scorecards prior to the stoppage. And yeah, so he was up. He was going to win unanimous decision, even with a knockdown. But the problem with all that, he did all of that, but the punches that were hurting more were Soto's. The punches that you can tell were affecting the guy more visibly, as far as like a highlight reel level, were Soto's. And that's probably the most surprising part of it. That even though Acosta was doing great body work in the middle rounds, he was taking a lot of steam out of Soto's punches. Soto recovered pretty well in the later rounds, and enough to do what he did in the 12th. Now, yeah. And let's get actually to the stoppage, because this is probably, unfortunately, this is what is going to cloud the fight and what is obviously a good contender for Fight of the Year. I understand the situation. Soto lands a left hook. Acosta is pretty much frozen for about 3 seconds. Soto goes after him. Acosta's hands, he's starting to pick him up, but not fast enough. And I see that the referee stops it. Part of me will agree with Gus that it was premature, and you have to give the champion the benefit of the doubt. Particularly, like I said, in that situation where if you let it go, the champion was going to win. But we have to go into the adage when it comes to the sport with the rash of injuries that we've seen. And we have to mention again, like Gus mentioned it, how many times Acosta was hurt at the hands of Soto. I'll always be in the area where it's better to stop the fight too early than to stop it too late. Now, the rematch can tell a very different thing. Soto should probably work a little bit more on his defense, particularly defense going from the head to the body, because that one was where Acosta was doing really, really well, going head, body. But at the same time, the punches that Soto were throwing, you could tell were the harder ones. You could tell that they were the ones having a bit of a more concussive impact as far as the highlight reel. And that is something that Costa definitely has to work into it, because they've already said it, they want an immediate rematch. And in many ways, like I said, the rematch could be better because Soto's going to have confidence, but Acosta knows he was winning the fight. But I'll always take it, like I said, chance in the referee in that sense when if it stopped a little bit too early. But I get people's arguments saying that the stoppage was early, particularly when you look at the scorecards. So, hey, just give me the rematch. Just hook it to my veins.
I'll go to you, Gail. I'm sorry. The reaction from the boxing press towards the stoppage, surprise, dumbfounded, where they were like, what the hell, as most folks who were watching it live on social media?
Absolutely. First of all, that check left hook came so fast. Suddenly, Acosta's down. And most people on press row, we're not there to be fans. We are not there to observe, enjoy, and chit chat. We are there to work. So you don't hear a lot of loud noises generally out of the media section, except on an occasion like this one where this punch comes out of nowhere. And I turn to my colleague, happened to be Albert Baker of Under the Hand Wraps to my left, and we both looked at each other and went, damn! And while we were processing the punch, suddenly the fight's being waved off. I mean, it literally happened that fast. So we had to kind of process whoa, wait, what happened? What the hell? We had a lot of that. We did have the opportunity, though, to hear from Taylor later, to get the explanation that I talked about a little as our panel did the show preview before we went live, which was that Taylor said, listen, he got hit with the punch. When I looked at him, his eyes were rolled back in his head and his hands were completely down at his sides, and he was 100% vulnerable to more damage. And in his judgment, he stopped the fight. That is a logical explanation, unless you've got money on the fight. I get it. The referee's job is to protect the fighter. There are other ways in the heat of things for a referee to find ways to slow down the grind of the fight, to give a champion in his fourth title defense every consideration. You can ask the ring physician to look at him. You can check the equipment. There's some ways to gain 10, 15 seconds that are legitimate. Send Soto over to the other corner. On the other hand, he'd moved right in. Any delay wouldn't necessarily be favorable to or fair to him. So while we didn't truly love it, it is understandable. Taylor is a very good referee. I am always one to back up a referee erring on the side of caution. Sometimes it is erring, but these guys have a lot of time in life after they leave the ring. I get that. But the truth is, we had said midway through the fight, all of us agreed, and you look back at my Twitter feed, you'll see that long before we got to that punch, we were all already talking about a rematch because the fight had been that darn good. And I talked in my preview that this might be the barn burner of the evening, and it turned out to be. So here's the interesting thing. Here's the scorecard. If you go to my Twitter account, those of you listening, PR Pro San Diego, it's my day job, PR Pro San Diego, I posted the scorecard. It's posted Friday night at 11:57 p.m. Pacific time. So one of the first judge had given Soto the first 4 rounds, and including the knockdown in the third, and given Acosta the rest of the rounds. So he was behind 7 rounds to 4 at that point with the knockdown. The second judge, that was Eddie Hernandez Sr. Gary Ritter had given Soto 3 rounds, and Judge Rudy Barragan had given Soto 2 rounds. So he was way behind on the scorecards, way behind, until that knockout happened at 23 seconds of the round. So bring on the rematch.
Yeah, let's hope it happens. Say Triple G and Canelo fight a third time on that undercard or any other big fight undercard, because yeah, the fight was that good, and we definitely need to see it once again. I want to move on to a couple final fights here that took place last night. Let's try to get through this quickly. Jermell Charlo fighting Jorge Cota in his hometown of Houston on the undercard of that. Rigondeaux fighting Ceja. I wasn't able to see the Rigondeaux fight in full. Rigondeaux winning by 8th round stoppage, but from what I'm hearing, he did not look that good. Charlo against Cota, I mean, he did what he had to do and almost caught a body in the process. Stopped him in the third, right hand counter, put him down the first time, and then he followed up with a huge right hand that splattered Cota along the splattered Cota in the ring, and like I said, he looked like he darn near killed him. That's how out he was. So for anybody who wants to pick this fight up, the Charlo bout as well as the Rigo bout, please do.
Well, Jermell did what Jermell was supposed to do in this sense. He picked up a showcase victory. This is a situation where the referee should have stopped it the first time. Because you saw the guy leaning in. He had almost a D'Anthony Joshua type of look when he was in the corner. Didn't really look like he wanted to be there after the first knockdown. That should have been stopped right then and there, because the referee didn't even have him walk to him. He just said, okay, pick up your gloves, and immediately Jermell lands another right hand, knocks him out completely, and that's how he stops it. So there is some referee malpractice in that area. As far as Rigo, I get the stoppage. Ceja was not going to win that fight. But that one to me was also like an early stoppage. Like Ceja didn't look that hurt. He got up. I do get it though. He was losing on the cards. There was really no point in continuing the fight. So it was something. Now, when it comes to Rigo, we don't know what he's going to do. Is he going to stay at 122, try to fight there? And for Jermell, we know he's just going to be waiting to make that rematch with Harrison. So we don't have to anticipate much.
Gail, I think you saw the fight as well. So like I said, the Rigo fight specifically. Give some more detail into that, because like as we was talking to so I didn't see it that much of it, but from all indication, from what I read, Rigo, he got the knockout, but he didn't look good in the process.
He did not look good at all. He looked sluggish. He looked, frankly, uninterested. Ceja was the one pressing the action. I tell you, the fight that it really reminded me of was the hideous fight he had with Drian Francisco in Las Vegas, and he just seemed to sleep at the switch. You know, I'm not sure that he has ever truly recovered from his fight with Lomachenko. So, his knockout win in his last fight aside, I mean, he just seems like he's operating in a fog. And Ceja was by far getting the better of it. In fact, in the prior round to the knockout, Rigo had thrown in the second round 5 punches. 5. So, second round, is he conserving his energy for later? Say what? It was just an inexplicable fight. And the truth is, my attention was wandering. It was that bad. And suddenly he lands the right punch. One and done. That one punch was perhaps his only real show of skill in the whole fight. And yeah, I'm being very harsh. Very harsh. Rigondeaux is Rigondeaux, as you prefer, Riggy. He is riding on his reputation, such as it is at this point. And I'm not sure that's deserved anymore. It's time for him to give some serious thought to his career. He is 38 years old, almost 39 in a couple of months. That's assuming you believe his Cuban birth certificate. And we all know how there's a way of somehow the digits on the birth year maybe getting a little messed up. Who the hell knows how old he is into his 40s? He has been lucky. He hasn't been hurt more seriously. And he's taking away money from the fans. When you go in and perform in that lackluster a manner, that's not fair to the fan who puts down the money to see someone making an honest effort. And I'm fine with a technical display of skill. I enjoy a good technical fight. It doesn't have to be blood and guts every single fight, but there has to be some skill applied somewhere. Either you're coming forward or you're controlling the fight from the outside. You're not just there. I mean, he was not much more than there. He simply got lucky winning this fight, and that's the bottom line.
Well, at the very least, he earned a shot down the line at Ray Vargas. But like I said, given from what I've read how he looked, it left much to be desired. Let's move on to some news here. I didn't put this in the original docket. My apologies, but news broke today that for the upcoming bout between Manny Pacquiao and Keith Thurman, no VADA testing. I want your reaction here. I'll start with you, Gus. Your thoughts on the fact that there will be no VADA testing for this fight. It will be just strict commission testing. Seems like there's no issue with it on either side, Pacquiao or Thurman's side. Do you have an issue with it, given your insight and your analysis both on your channel and here on Pound for Pound Boxing Report in terms of the drug testing system and VADA itself?
Oh, it's just opening up Pandora's box, Mike. To try and be as succinct as possible, because I'll be subsequently doing a video on this later on with a little bit more research. But yes, I have major issues, but it kind of sort of re-emphasizes the point that I've made all along, that I 100% believe that over 90% of all champions, guys ranked in the top 10, are all on performance enhancing. And I believe from my own research and sort of analyzing weigh-ins and looking at their transition from sort of amateur to professional, how their fighting style perhaps changes, whether they become punchers later on as compared to what they were in the amateurs, etc. I think I'm able to sort of deduce and also look at the way fighters, especially like Keith Thurman, Mike, and even Floyd Mayweather was a master of doing it, was the way that they just engineer these little retirements here and there. And those are always the red flags to when the fighter will then go back on to, redeveloping, whether it's on EPOs or they're on growth hormones. And you can clearly see it from the weigh-in pictures, Mike, when you actually look at their abdominals and you look at You look at you can see the traction marks all around the naval passage clearly when the fighter's actually been injecting into him. Those were clearly evident on Floyd Mayweather's weigh-in pictures, and with Keith Thurman, I have no reservations, and with Manny Pacquiao has always been an interesting one. A lot of people have always questioned Pacquiao, and they've looked at his physical change as well, in particularly his head, the size it's sort of developed as well. But he's conducted testing. He's been under VADA, and that's the disappointing thing, Mike. He's passed, I think, 4 VADA tests. So for him to now make a complete reversal now, that's very disappointing. So no, Mike, I'm quite frankly quite disgusted, but it kind of confirms. I think both of these guys are going to be roided up to the maximum. Keith Thurman certainly needs it because he's a fighter who's become literally shot overnight, and the way Manny Pacquiao has actually been looking in his training camps, the speed, the intensity, and the ferocity is back with him. So I think Keith Thurman obviously needs to sort of counter that in one respect, but the normal commission testing doesn't make any sense. And it's been a problem with the PBC, Mike, because they've always resorted to USADA testing over the years. They'd rather pay a lot more money, certainly the Al Heyman fighters, to conduct USADA testing. And I've done videos on USADA testing and their laboratories and the type of testing they do, their criterion, the fact that they can send redacted results to the commission. They're not under no legal obligation. I've gone right down into their compliance statements, Mike. USADA has no credibility in drug testing. Quite frankly, a lot of the sort of national drug testing associations have all got flaws in all of their policies throughout. And even with VADA, Mike, to a certain extent, although they're not an accredited or an associate member of the World Anti-Doping Association, but their testing methods are actually a lot better, but they have their own prohibited list now. They've totally separated from WADA's main list, and they've actually got a lot more substances on there. So their testing, you can say to a certain extent, is far more acute, but it's still not 100%. There's still some problems with it. But the fighters now, and certainly these fighters, with the level of money they're getting, Mike, and they can certainly afford the VADA testing. So I'm very, very disappointed and disgusted by it.
I'll go to you, Gail and Daniel. Do you share a similar reaction to Gus upon this news about Nevada testing for the upcoming fight between Pacquiao and Thurman?
No, I'll tell you what. No, because neither camp and neither fighter is concerned or complaining about it. And in the end, those are the two that matter. If this is fine with both of them, they have no issue with it, then I'm truthfully not too concerned. This is being brought up, if anything, to draw attention to the fight, create controversy, and sell tickets. So in us discussing it, they've done their job. Listen, Pacquiao has done VADA testing before at times. I'm not sure about Thurman, frankly. I'm not definitely getting the hair up on my back over this. It's just not concerning me too terribly much. If these two feel they're on an even playing field and you don't hear any side squawking or complaining too much, that's all I need to hear.
Your thoughts, Daniel?
Well, it's not like one of the two parties hasn't exactly been dogged by accusations of alleged PD use despite not testing positive for over a decade or anything. Not like one of these parties hasn't been accused of doping since his rematch with Eric Morales.
Which is
I want,
irony. Which is irony. You say that, given the recent comment in the chat. Living a God-filled life. He says that Manny is a God-fearing man and has never used drugs. He accepts Jesus Christ as his personal savior, and he gets his power from God. Okay, fine and dandy, but that doesn't mean that Manny Pacquiao has not been doesn't deserve to be questioned. Proceed, Daniel.
like I said, there's a reason why these accusations have started since the second Morales fight. That being said, you have to give Manny benefit of that. He has never tested positive for a banned substance when he's been tested. We have to give benefit of that, but it leaves an ugly taste in some people's mouth. Now, Gail is right. If Thurman's camp and Manny's camp are okay with this, then yeah, you can't have too much of a gripe on it.
But this is for a title, then.
But yeah, but this is the key part. Yes, this is for the WBA. This is the WBA title. This is a tough part, though. Number one.
Then they should be drug testing. Absolutely.
Yes,
if it's for a title,
they should. They should. But that's what I mean. In one area, I understand. In both parties, but the part that will supersede that is, we know neither camp's actually the one in charge in this situation. We know Thurman's camp answers to somebody, and it's the same person that Manny's camp is now answering to. So it behooves the PBC, Al Heyman, or should anything come up within the next month and a half, Dana White, to actually get a certified situation going when it comes to this. Because yes, I understand the WBA is not mandating it, and I know they wanted to do a program in combination with the WBC with their clean boxing program. The problem though is you have to have certain standards when it comes to this fight, because it's going to be a fight where you have a man who has not fought a lot, who's supposedly coming off injuries, and in the meantime getting the car accidents or playing the flute probably. And on the other hand, you have a 40-year-old man who's only boxing because he has to waste time before he tries to run to be the head of state of his country. And obviously, we also know that 40-year-old man is trying to get another 40-plus-year-old man to rematch him to rob us all blind again.
Yeah, so, there's that.
The first fight was a draw, though, that one. Just out of saying
that. Gus, no trolling right now.
Yeah, no, I'm serious. Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, I scored the first fight and draw.
We're going to have to agree to disagree with that one.
Yeah. But
I just don't want to see it again. I don't want to see it again, though. I just don't.
No. I don't either. But that's the bad part of it. It could wind up happening again because Manny wins. He has a welterweight title. Floyd might feel like, I want to continue fighting now. And then it goes in the same way. But I understand it. I understand Gil's argument. If both parties, technically, both parties that are tying into it are okay with it, yeah, you don't really have to raise that much of a gripe. However, it shouldn't be up. It should never be up to them. It should be up to the sanctioning body. It should be up to the WBA to actually get this, to actually enforce this. You are the sanctioning body that has, granted, hilariously, not been able to consolidate your belts. Like the 130-pound situation is the perfect example. You're also the sanctioning body that, we have to say, his history hasn't exactly been the most exemplary when it comes to certain situations. And at the end of the day, you at the end of the day, somebody has to do something that comes into it, because the commission testing. At first, this fight in Vegas or in California?
Fight is in Vegas. Fight is in Vegas. So under the Nevada State Athletic Commission.
Okay, so we know the history of Nevada State Athletic Commission when it comes to certain things. So that doesn't give a lot of people confidence. But it is what it is, unfortunately, until the sanctioning bodies actually, besides the WBC, which is taking their thing somewhat serious, until all four sanctioning bodies get their act together and the man testing, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's USADA or VADA. But at the end of the day, this got to get together, because you're going to get more of these situations like this.
We just had a situation. Didn't we just have a situation where the WBC weren't going to sanction the fight because one of the fighters was refusing to conduct VADA testing or to even enroll into their clean boxing program. So you've just got.
You just had that.
Yeah.
The Brita Snowaki fight. Yes.
So that's obviously my point. You've got issues where there's no policies between, the governing bodies or the sanctioning bodies, and they should be setting the benchmarks. They should, does Pacquiao really need that WBA regular fucking belt? They should have just, then you can just do whatever, and it allows the WBA to extricate themselves from any sort of criticism, saying that they're not setting any standards. So later on, if they make a decision where they actually try and enforce drug testing, where one of the fighters are not, or they've stripped a fighter because he's failed it, then how does that make them look when they're using double standards?
Oh, they're the kings of double standards. We were just talking about what they did to Alberto Machado. So what's new?
It's a very tough thing. I'll put it this: it's very, very tough to seat the moral high ground to the WBC, but the WBA does a very efficient job of it.
Hey, but they've got the clean boxing program, the WBC. Until and unless fighters themselves insist on it, it has to come from the athletes in their camps, not the sanctioning bodies, not anyone else. And we can count on one tiny little hand's fingers the number of fighters who've committed to 365-day-a-year testing. And Nonito Donaire was the first, and he doesn't have a lot of company. And that's who we should be leaning on. We shouldn't worry about the commissions or the sanctioning bodies. The fighters could change this tomorrow, voluntarily, going through VADA, which is by far the superior standard, at least in the United States. They could take the matter into their own hands, but they don't want to. Some of them don't want to get caught. Some of them don't want to get caught making a mistake, which is a little bit different. Not knowing 100% what's under their control or not. So when they're relying on other people to, give them supplements and prepare meals, and if it isn't being done with their hands, they have a legitimate worry. No matter how much they think, they trust somebody else. So I think we're going to be in this kind of a situation. And as long as the combatants themselves agree, that's the best we can do. If one objects and it becomes a contract issue, then yeah, they've got to have to work it out, and they shouldn't force one fighter to go into a situation where he feels the deck is stacked against him.
But when the WBC actually, when they designated the clean boxing program, they set out saying that all fighters and champions and those fighters ranked inside the top 15 would be expected to sort of enroll into the program and then be eligible for sort of voluntary testing. But what they said initially was that it would be subsidized 100% by the WBC. And that's been the problem. They've not allocated sufficient funding for it. And looking at, I get reports on the clean boxing program, and looking at it, I think only 15% have been tested since its introduction, or around circa that sort of figure. And
Oh,
so
absolutely. No, I don't disagree with you. I mean, the intention is all well and good, but the bottom line is the WBC does not have the funds or the personnel to test regularly. They have to count on a fighter worrying about a random test at any time. And if it doesn't come for 9 months, it might not. It might not happen, but it might. So,
but we're talking
I
about two
think is
fighters.
that they always have to be ready, in theory.
But this is the problem, Joe. We're talking about a lot of the divisions, certainly the lower weight categories, where the cost of testing, it's literally more than even their purses. But now you've got a situation where you've got two marquee fighters who can clearly afford drug testing. If they're talking about reputation and legacies on the line, they can clearly do it, but they're refusing to do so. So that is just unbelievable, if you ask me.
Yeah.
So it's
Like I said, to cede the moral high ground to that program, even with its well intentions, it's still pretty bad. But they're at least somewhat. I'll give the WBC this. At least they're somewhat trying to live by some of those rules. Yes, we agree. Like, they haven't done any really enough testing, but at least they're trying to somewhat honor their word. Like, wasn't it like about a couple of weeks ago that you had Jose Pedraza and Shakur Stevenson, particularly Stevenson, who we thought was going to be fast tracked to a featherweight title shot, suddenly be kicked out of the WBC rankings because they themselves didn't sign up for the program.
Yep, absolutely right.
Yeah, ultimately, at the end of the day, you would like A, consistency, B, a fight of this high profile, to have all the I's dotted and T's crossed and all precautions taken. Um, would you like to see VADA testing for this kind of a fight? Yes. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen. Um, People are not going to. It's not going to matter to the folks at the end of the day because they just want to see the fight. But to people who care about these issues and purity, quote unquote, of the sport, uh, um, this raises eyebrows. This raises eyebrows. But given that, in spite of that, at the end of the day, the fight is going to happen. And this will be, unfortunately, swept under the rug, in spite of all the legitimate hell raising. Let's just hope in the aftermath, the consistency and that all parties involved when it comes to the sport that they claim coming in, um, 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 it's you will see more of it moving forward, in spite of what people may seem funny style with this decision. Let's move on to start wrapping up the show by doing some previews of the fights. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this up between everybody here. Doing 3 fights. You're going to split this up. Uh, I'll go to you on this one. Um, I'll go to you on this one, Gail. ESPN Plus card, ESPN Top Rank, I should say, happening Friday night, I believe it is. Uh, Richard Commey, who finally achieved his dream of becoming a world champion, winning the IBF lightweight title. He's going to make the first defense against Ray Beltran. He was supposed to fight Aloma, negotiations for that fight, but unfortunately, there was derailed due to injured hand. He's finally getting back into the ring. I'm looking at this, Gail, and Beltran, who did not look good in losing the belt to Pedraza, I want to say last year. If this was a younger Ray Beltran, a fresher Ray Beltran, I would give him more of a chance against the power punching Commey. I just think that Commey is too hard hitting, too fresh at this point, too young at this point for the likes of of Ray Beltran, who's a little bit long in the tooth. Your thoughts on this fight?
No, I completely agree. I think this will be a fun fight for the fans to watch as long as it lasts, an all-action fight between Commey and Beltran. It's actually a matchup I like, but you're right. Beltran is a veteran warrior. He's been in a ton of tough fights. He gives it his all. How much does he have left to give? It's hard to say. You've got to favor Commey in the fight. But as we've seen in the last week or so, a guy with punching power and with some veteran skills has that opportunity, to have lightning strike with a one punch knockout victory if he can throw it. So that's what'll make the fight fun to watch. But I do think Commey will win the fight. It depends on how long Beltran can hold out and whether he can get lucky and throw the right punch. But this is Commey's fight to win and probably Commey's fight to lose.
Sorry, I was on mute there. The Commey Beltran fight is happening, as I said, Friday. That's going to happen in Temecula, California, on ESPN. The following,
How lucky is Ray Beltran? This guy always gets title shots, isn't it?
He's very popular in the southwestern United States. He's a good ticket draw. He's got a compelling story against the background of immigration controversy in the United States and this part of the world. So he is a money
failed drugs tests, but he's still popular.
He is. I don't disagree with you, Gus. That's kind of become the theme of this. It's kind of become the theme of this week's show, whether we meant to or not. You're right. Ray Beltran has gotten popped himself for banned substances. He's had his run-ins with the law as a younger man. But his story about trying to keep his family in the United States because he was here under illegal immigration status for a long time. It's the difficult topic of whether the family should be punished for the sins of the fathers, literally. And in Beltran's case, his father brought him here as a young man illegally. And much like we are beginning to think of gender as not something binary, ethnicity and citizenship is a lot more fluid along the U.S.-Mexico border where you've lived here all your life like I have than most people would believe. It's just, until recently, it was just not a big deal, frankly. And so people relate to him. He is a likable guy. He does put on entertaining fights. What can I say? I'll be there.
It's almost ironic, and look at the way Kid Galahad was vilified last week for his misdemeanors in the past, but simultaneously on the same night, the way Tyson Fury was paraded, but they all forgot about the way Ioka covered up his offense. It's just quite funny the way boxing, the clear sort of double standards in boxing, man. I felt for Galahad, man. He was just all throughout last week. He was just getting questions about that spiked drink that his brother apparently gave him in for the haste or whatever else. But for Fury, they didn't mention absolutely anything, but they were just parading him out in his Apollo Creed attire, etc. It was disgusting.
I will recommend to anybody, although it is, I think, behind a paywall, subscription paywall, the new boxing section in The Athletic. Rafe Bartholomew wrote a column on this very topic about past misdeeds by various people. When do you call them out? When do we hold them accountable? When do we not? Nothing's being said currently. Nobody seems to be bringing up Tyson Fury's rants, homophobic rants of not too many years ago. Some truly offensive statements. they seem to have vanished into thin air.
Because there is, for lack of a better word, there's an effort, if not, for lack of a better word, or less inflammatory word, an agenda there set in place for Tyson Fury when it comes to popularizing him in the States by Aram, by ESPN. You're not going to hear, there's not going to be much mention of his controversial comments. There's not going to be much mention of the positive drug test. It's about branding him now as much as hyping his ability as a fighter. And I want to apologize if you hear some background
That's
noise.
very impressive thunder. My God.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's a
that was not
thunderstorm.
a sound effect, people. That was
Yeah,
real.
there's a thunderstorm rolling through right now as doing this live recording. But yeah,
And you remember, Mike, you remember like a couple of years ago on the show when I was talking about that, I was actually investigating that. I was contacting UCAD, I contacted even the British Boxing Border Control. I said that according to your own sort of doctrine and statement, you've actually got to open your case files, you've got to publish your prohibited list. But they just totally blanked me out. I was asking for information about the EA test. They just didn't want to entertain anything. So if anybody was like leading that investigation, it was yours truly, mate.
yeah. So that's why you're not going to hear much of it because there are plans in place to Americanize, for lack of kind of Americanize Fury, uh, to make him the main fighter um, on the ESPN top ranks stable. And you saw the plans leading up to the fight with Schwartz. You're going to continue to see that plan when next time he gets back into the ring, presumably in October. You're going to see it further when they eventually rematch against Deontay Wilder. You're not going to hear that stuff. It's going to be conveniently swept under the rug.
Yeah, and it's no coincidence that he didn't go ahead with that contractual rematch with Vladimir Klitschko, who wanted stringent drug testing for that rematch.
Yep. We have to remember that. And I'll have to add this as well when you think about the whole issue with Tyson Fury in the comments. Because remember, I went into this last week and I'm like, if it escapes the boxing media world and then winds up in the news, then they have a problem when it comes to Tyson Fury and a lot of the comments that he's made. And yeah, they are trying to Americanize and they're trying to make him essentially like an immigrant story, the bright hope of the heavyweight division. And it's gonna get pretty ugly when it comes to the hypocrisy that's gonna happen to it because yeah, Fury's a likable personality. Yeah, he can actually give you quotes. And yes, ESPN will do their best to hide the comments. But at the end of the day, he's gonna slip up. He's gonna do something that is not gonna be right, unfortunately. And
Fuck
we'll
Fury.
tend
I'm just
to
glad that WBO have made Usyk the mandatory for the winner of Joshua and Ruiz. Man. That's the only bright light in the division.
Mm. Let's move on to some other fights here. I'll go to you on this one, Daniel. Well, you mentioned that, Gus. I should have mentioned that during the show that the WBO has officially named Alexander Usyk, former undisputed unified cruiserweight champion. They've named Usyk the number one mandatory contender in the WBO, and Usyk, who was supposed to have a fight last month, will probably fight later on in the summer, early fall. Once he gets that out the way, look for him to eventually get the winner of Joshua Ruiz early, mid 2020. I should have mentioned that. Thanks for mentioning the situation with Usyk. Going to you, Daniel, on this next fight. We mentioned earlier, we talked about Charlo in his win over Jorge Cota. He did what he was supposed to do well. That fight took place in Houston, Texas, the hometown of the Charlo brothers, this weekend on Saturday. Also in Houston, Jermall Charlo, #1 contender WBC at middleweight. He's going to fight Brandon Adams, and just like Mel had his way with Cota, I expect the same thing here. I just don't see anything in the resume or based on video I've seen of Adams that says to me he's going to provide any kind of problems for Maul Charlo.
Yeah, this is just going to be a showcase, as much of a showcase you can for Jermall as possible, because the goal is pretty simple. You're going to try to force Canelo into a mandatory spot with WBC. The problem is, if you're Al Heyman in the PBC, you're dealing with a man in Canelo who's pretty much has already told the WBC, fuck you, take your belt. At least once. And that's not to me it's a winning strategy when it comes into the whole area of forcing the fight with Canelo, particularly when, like I mentioned, in September is very likely just going to be the rematch with Golovkin. And not to mention as well as there could also be a unification fight with him and Andrade happening. So Canelo's got a little bit more options. And yes, Jermall has to look good. And Jermall will likely look good. But it's going to be a situation where he's going to look good and then he's going to have to find a reasonable path to keep himself busy. And it's almost going to become almost like what Dillian White has had to go through the last couple of years.
Yeah. To make serious hay at 160 pounds, Charlo gonna have to go. He's gonna have to go to the other side of the street here, because with Canelo, with Andrade, those are the main fights. I don't know if Canelo will ever give him a fight. I mean, you got Rob Brent out there. Brent has a rematch coming up. The name escapes me. The Japanese fighter he beat for the belt. He has a rematch in Japan. I don't know if that fight. Murata, but still, he's #1 contender, Maul, for that WBC belt. And just like Dillian White, he has earned a title shot. He deserves a title shot. The problem is, I don't know if Canelo will give him a title shot. Just like I don't think Deontay Wilder will ever give Dillian White a title shot. I don't think that will ever happen. So,
the reasoning for Deontay not giving Dillian White a title shot, it's very different from Canelo not giving Jermall title shot. The concept of at least the conventional wisdom when it comes to Canelo and Jermall is people think that Canelo's camp think that Jermall is too much of a risk when it comes to getting as far as a fight with Canelo in order for him to get into a fight. Even though Andrade could present similar problems to Jermall, when it comes to Deontay and Dillian, it's just more the fact that Eddie Hearn just keeps putting Dillian White as this roadblock to what Deontay wanted, which is the fight with Joshua. Well, that roadblock's technically out of the way now, because if Reese beats Joshua again, there is a legitimate chance that Eddie Hearn's going to be completely frozen out of the process. Completely frozen out of the process, because with Andy Reese being without Heyman, that falls into all PBC category.
No, not if Usyk is the mandatory for the
right,
WBO.
right. I just think Deontay Wilder don't want to give it to him because Deontay Wilder kind of being an a-hole.
But think about it, Gus. What would the WBO supersede it if it was a unification fight that's up next? Most other sanctioning bodies will, even the IBF, will be a little bit more lenient on their mandatories should it be a unification fight.
But look at this though. Look, the when you've got all of the belts now, the WBA was vacant, and Joshua but when Povetkin fought Joshua, correct me if I'm wrong, but Povetkin was the mandatory for the WBA as well as the WBO, yeah? 2 sanctioning bodies. And that was a mandatory Joshua had. So the WBC have just had their mandatory with Brazil, and now that leaves the IBF, yeah? So the next round of the WBO, but I think it was the WBA who actually got that sanction. Povetkin, so I'm talking about, the rotation is the way the sanctioning bodies do it when you have a unified champion. So from what I've sort of sat down and looked, the next belt that should be contended from a mandatory position is the WBO, because Joseph Parker didn't fight a mandatory. So when Joshua took the belt off him, he'd never defended that WBO belt to a mandatory. It was only his WBA belt. So Usyk will be in line for the next title shot. So Ruiz will have to either fight him or vacate the title if he beats Joshua. That's the way I'm looking at it.
I mean,
They'll call that.
Pulev is IBF mandatory.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I just think that I just think he will be secondary to get a shot over Povetkin. Given the status of Povetkin, who he was, what he has done, I just think it's all set up in the cards that he's going to get the next shot at the winner of the Joshua Ruiz rematch. I just think it's all set in the cards for him.
That's a possibility, but remember, he was due to fight Joshua. You're right. That was the IBF mandatory. Joshua's defense when Takam stepped in late notice when he pulled out.
Yes.
So, and then he beat Hughie Fury in Bulgaria. But remember, the IBF had made Dillian White and Pulev went to purse bids for the IBF mandatory, and the Matchroom lost that. But Eddie Hearn made a counter offer. Dillian White didn't want to go to Bulgaria, but Hughie Fury stepped in. He went to Bulgaria. So when you look at it, I don't think Dillian White deserves absolutely anything, man. He had the chance to fight Luis Ortiz for the WBC mandatory. He chose to fight Derek Chisora on pay-per-view. So when you all break it down, Mike, Dillian White hasn't really beaten anybody highly ranked to fight for the WBC belt. If you break it down, it's only Hellenius, a Malcolm Tan, and a Chisora and the Lucas Brown. None of them were ranked above him in the WBC.
Your thoughts on this, Gail? Because it's just us all dudes talking here. I don't want to leave you out of discussion.
Yeah, I think Dillian White has been screwed over so many times. For fights that he should have gotten. At least he's finally on the calendar with somebody, with Oscar Rivas. I'd like to see him. We need to see how he performs in that fight. The cards are shuffling on the heavyweight deck like crazy, and we need to see a few more performances. We need to see what Usyk does. We need to see what White does. We assume we're going to get a Ruiz Joshua fight in December is the word I've gotten, and the word is that it's in December at Madison Square Garden. That's not that horribly far away. We've got Wilder and Ortiz in the mix, and although we think we know how the script is written, we found out in the last few weeks, not necessarily the case. Rivas wasn't even supposed to win his fight with Brian Jennings, and he was losing up until the moment he won. So I think any decision on who should fight whom is a little premature. We need to let these current fights on the schedule play themselves out in the ring, not get ahead of ourselves too fast, and then see, where all the cards land Everybody needs to have a dance partner somewhere. The beauty of it is there are plenty of choices. We don't exactly know how they're all going to be sorted out. Hell, we may need the Harry Potter sorting hat before this is all over.
Let's move on to the last fight here on the docket that I want to preview. The same night as Charlo fighting Brandon Adams. This fight will happen in Providence as Andrade, who we mentioned while talking Charlo, Demetrius Andrade. He's making a mandatory defense against Sulecki. I'm going to you on this one, Gus. Andrade has looked pretty good his last two fights out. He's finally in a position where he can make some serious moves at 154, 160 pounds, fighting Sulecki, number one contender, who beat his name is right in front of me. Gabe Rosado last time out, tough fight, was knocked down, but he did enough to win Sulecki. Your thoughts on Andrade and Sulecki?
Should be a competitive fight, Mike. Meciej Sulecki is a decent boxer. When he made the transition from Poland, he's suddenly, been stopping a few opponents here and there. Then all of a sudden he's become a bit of a puncher as well. But he can box, and he gave Danny Jacobs, I thought, a lot of problems in the fight. A very, very close fight, I felt. Had it not been for the knockdown, maybe he had a chance of a shot, but who knows? But I thought it was reasonably close. Against Rosado, that was a bit of a surprise, sort of a washed-up Rosado. He was always tough, when he came over to the UK, caused a few problems with Murray and that, so he still had a bit about him, but Solanke's punch resistance is a concern, certainly to the body as well. Some fighters just don't react well to punishment. He just seems to be one of them. But Andrade, Mike, he just flatters to deceive. I think he's one of the worst champions around at the moment. And the way his career has been managed as well, hasn't really done anything, hasn't really fought anybody. The only decent person he has on his resume who is a good fighter I'd like is Jack Holkay. That was a very close fight, and we saw what Jack Holkay did to Sergey Dermianchenko. He gave him hell. So after that, he's just, he got a gift touch, and I've already done a video on that whole Billy Joe Saunders sort of fiasco and who they brought in for him to defend his title, etc. So, this, at long last, this is a bit of a step up. So yeah, I expect it to be a competitive fight. Not sure what sort of Andrade is going to turn up. I don't think Sulecki is too outclassed in the sort of skill department. The way I've seen Andrade recently, Mike, I've just seen him become a lot more flat-footed, looks a lot more erratic. I don't see much fluidity, much rhythm in his boxing. One of those guys, it's just very much style over substance. I don't think he really has made the transition from when he did very well in the amateurs, when he won a sort of a world championship. I don't think he's fulfilled that, that sort of potential. So for him to be calling that some of, the Alvarez and people like that, I think is very premature. Who was it a number of years ago? I gave him a lot of trouble. Was it Varnes a number of years back?
Oh, Monterosa. I think then he did fight Veins. Yeah.
Yeah. That I'm not sure how people score that fight, but that was also a very, very close fight. I think Varnes may have even dropped him. Was it round 11 or 12?
I can't remember what he was dropped. Maybe you can help us out, Gail and Daniel.
So you just look at the performances in his career, Mike. He's struggled whenever he's actually stepped up his level of opposition. So the fight could go either way, Mike.
Yeah, that's always been the thing with Andrade. That's always been the thing. Like there's flashes of somebody that's a really, really good fighter there. There's flashes that he has both the intelligence, the hand speed, the wherewithal to be a really good fighter. But whenever it's been him, or whenever it's Mount Erosion, and then whenever it's been something like maybe Tony Harrison gave him a couple of issues at times before he took care of it.
Yeah,
It is tough.
going
Say
back just to put this on the record, the Martirosian fight with Andrade was in 2013. So, fair enough, quite some time ago. That was a split decision. The fight took place in Corpus Christi, Texas, of all things. And yes, Vanes Martirosian dropped Andrade in the first round of that fight. If you recall, maybe you don't recall. So, he has struggled with guys, 6 years or 5 years later. We're all ripping on Golovkin for fighting somebody at the level of Vanes Martirosian, but he nearly got the better, admittedly, several years ago, of Andrade. So, he's also had some. He's had some good fights, some blowouts, but then he's also had some real fights where the question marks floating above your head. So what version of him are we going to see? I mean, the fight against Colque, Andrade can be knocked down. Did you mention Alentis Fox dropped him in their fight in 2017? So, and he's barely had a fight a year for the last couple of years. That's my bigger problem with him. Is just his inactivity. That's never a good look.
He's a
And
bum.
I ain't gonna say he's a bum, but this should
I'll
be.
say
In my opinion, this is gonna be a.
He's in danger of becoming one. I would say that. He needs to be a live dog and step it up right now.
I ain't gonna say he's a bum, but I think, but I will say this is gonna be. To me, this is gonna be a good fight, but I think that Andrade will do just enough to get the win. He'll have his trouble spots in there, but because Sulecki is solid fundamentals. Doesn't have the quickest feet in the world, but he knows what he's doing in there. But hand speed, the agility of Andrade will be enough to eke out a decision win. I think we're going to shut the show down on that note. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody who joined us in the live YouTube chat. Denise, MB, Unrivaled Boxing, aka McGregor, Jim Leahy, thanks for joining us in the chat. If you like what you heard, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. Also subscribe to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Spotify as well. Going to go around the panel here, starting with you, Gail from Communities Digital News. Let the folks know where they can find you if they want to talk boxing, if they want to talk fitness, not fitness, but business, small business advice, as well as all things media.
Well, and Women's World Cup this week. You can find me at Communities Digital News, which is COMM, COMM, Digi, DIGI News, COMMDigiNews.com.
I'll go to you, Daniel from the Inscriber, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat. Let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yes, you can find me. Twitter, Ruckus99, and I think hopefully by Wednesday or Thursday we should have the show with the folks at 4boxings.com. So talking about this weekend's fights, last weekend's fights, and we might look into see how the half year went, because the year's already almost half over.
Years gone by quickly now that I think about it. Last but certainly not least, first of all, I want to give a shout out to Jacob. Hadn't been on in a while. Jacob from Jab Hook Boxing. Want to give a shout out to Bo from Truth and Facts About Sports, as well as Three Kings Boxing. Give a shout out to those brothers. Again, last but certainly not least, Gus from Corruption and Boxing, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk music. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Yeah. Yeah, you can hit me up on Skype, um, as well as on YouTube. I have a channel there, Corruption space in space boxing.
For those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk music, for those who want to talk fitness, you know what it is. On Twitter, Brother JR at Brother JR76, as I said to begin the show. Um, if you want to talk, for those, as I said to begin the show, if you want to find out all the information regarding Pound for Pound Box Report, the blog page is the place to go to, p4pboxreport.wordpress.com, where you can find links to where to find us on social media, where to find us on all platforms that carry podcasts, where to donate. And as I say, as I've been saying for the last few weeks, I am an online coach for beachbody.com. Let's Build Together Fitness Challenge starts July 1st. Hint, hint, not Daniel, as well as you, Gail. Starts July 1st if you're interested in some fun and challenging workouts. A group accountability fitness challenge that I'm doing on the 1st of July for the month of July, starting July 1st and then July 31st. If you want to check that out, you can hit me up. You can send me a DM on Twitter. You can hit me up on Pound for Pound Box Report. On the blog page, I have a link to my beach body coaching site on there as well. On the next episode, Pound for Pound Box Report, we will do a recap for sure of the fights between Charlo, between Andrade and Sulecki, between Charlo and Adams, Commey, Beltran. I don't know if we'll have a show next week because next week is the week of the 4th. So I may just have everyone take a week off. I'm not sure. I'll let you folks know as the week goes along. But for sure, on the next episode, we will do a recap of those 3 fights that I just mentioned and boxing news and boxing previews as well. So yeah, this has been episode 257 of Pound for Pound Box Report. For Gail from Communities Digital News, Daniel from The Inscriber, Gus from Corruption and Boxing. I'm your host, Michael. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Summer